Prince William has staged what can only be described as a quiet, calculated coup inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, marking a decisive turning point in modern royal history. His first major, uncompromising move has been to systematically dismantle Queen Camilla's influence and pull back her involvement in the royal machine after a secret luxury yacht controversy completely exploded behind closed doors. The most shocking aspect of this entire situation isn't merely the existence of the luxury vessel itself, but rather the astonishing fact that this whole multi-layered scandal unraveled simply because of a routine maritime ship registry update. The exact kind of obscure administrative filing that exists purely for maritime insurance and regulatory compliance, which virtually no casual observer ever reads. Yet, that single document triggered a dramatic chain reaction that is now actively reshaping the British monarchy in real time. The story begins in late July 2025, while Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, were carrying out an intense, back-to-back schedule of high-profile public engagements across the United Kingdom, visiting a children's hospice in Birmingham and honoring veterans near Edinburgh. Queen Camilla was quietly spending time aboard an extravagant superyacht anchored off the glamorous southern coast of France. This was no official crown vessel. It was not chartered to the royal household, nor was there any entry log in the official court circular. The ship, named the Esperanza III, was registered in Malta, owned through a complex holding company structure in Luxembourg, and linked to a Swiss-based financier whose name appeared nowhere on Camilla's public schedule or official press releases. No announcement was made to public, no royal correspondents were briefed, and even the palace press office had zero record of this journey. It was deliberately kept entirely off the official books. While the yacht owner had no criminal record, European lobbying disclosures revealed that his corporate entities maintained active commercial interests in heritage land development, property laws, and agriculture, areas dangerously close to royal patronage decisions and duchy estate management. Furthermore, the guest list during those 5 days on the Mediterranean included a major political donor with active property planning applications in the West Country, a European broadcasting executive with links to royal endorsements, and individuals linked to prior lobby investigations in Brussels. None were present in an official capacity. The breach came to light not through an investigative leak, but when a diligent royal researcher cross-referenced the newly updated maritime registry filing with a private photograph briefly uploaded to Instagram by one of the guests before being hastily deleted. The image captured a private deck dinner. Within 48 hours, the photograph reached British and European media outlets specializing in corporate transparency networks. By mid-August, journalists began pressing the palace press office for answers, catching royal officials completely off guard. This situation was uniquely damaging because of the timing. Over preceding 18 months, William had aggressively championed a new set of internal governance standards. He demanded strict controls on external corporate relationships, mandatory reporting of private hospitality, and an unyielding zero-tolerance policy designed to protect the crown from further reputation-damaging commercial scandals. William's team had issued these clear, mandatory guidelines to all senior royal households, including Camilla's. She accepted the invitation anyway. When the news reached Kensington Palace, the atmosphere was described by insiders as one of controlled fury. William does not engage in public outbursts or media counterleaks. His approach is quiet, methodical, and absolute. When William determines an individual or an arrangement poses an existential risk to the institution, he removes them entirely. He proved this when he systematically restructured royal roles, distanced Prince Andrew, and stripped away informal arrangements that lacked clear accountability. Crucially, William did not learn about Camilla's voyage from newspaper headlines. Someone deep within the inner circle, whether a guest, a staff member, or a maritime contact, passed the details directly to Kensington Palace before the press ever placed their first call. This direct warning confirmed to William that the event was not an innocent oversight, but a fundamental breach of protocol. Subsequent investigation into the paper trail exposed deeper complexities. The Esperanza III's ownership under Verlaine Capital Partners in Luxembourg revealed connections to heritage property lobbying. Furthermore, internal checks uncovered that Camilla had accepted secret hospitality aboard the very same yacht during the summer of 2023, an event quietly flagged by an official at the time but buried without being escalated up the chain of command. What initially appeared to be a single error in judgment unraveled into a repeating pattern of undeclared hospitality paired with corporate donations to royal-adjacent charity structures. By early September 2025, William summoned a decisive confrontation. Rather than convening at Buckingham Palace, he called a high-level meeting at his own residence, Kensington Palace. In attendance were his private secretary, his communications director, and a senior official from King Charles's household who was firmly ordered, rather than politely invited, to attend. William placed a thick folder on the table containing port logs, charity accounts, lobbying disclosures, and the hidden record from 2023. He demanded to know who had buried the previous disclosure and laid out a chronological timeline showing how corporate interests overlapped with royal networks. When pressed on when King Charles was informed, it became clear the king had only received a casual personal update about a relaxing holiday, completely unaware of the Luxembourg holding company, the lobbying history, or the underlying financial connections. William noted plainly that the palace governance system had failed to protect the institution. He then issued 3 non-negotiable demands: a complete written financial disclosure delivered to the king's private secretary within 7 days, a comprehensive audit of Camilla's patronages for potential corporate conflicts, and an immediate termination of all contact with the yacht's owner. Although Camilla attempted to push back through Charles, arguing that private travel was a personal matter and warning of potential media fallout, William remained resolute, pointing out that the story was already breaking and that transparency was the only way to safeguard the crown's future. Within days, William formally rejected an incomplete disclosure submitted by Camilla's office, an unprecedented act of authority by a future monarch that signaled the formal end of the old way of doing business inside the royal family. The formal rejection of Queen Camilla's disclosures marked the beginning of an unprecedented power struggle, shifting the internal dynamic of the royal household into uncharted territory. With the initial stalemate broken, the underlying tension escalated rapidly when palace investigators uncovered a critical piece of intelligence that had previously gone unnoticed. Exactly 6 weeks prior to the July yacht excursion, one of the prominent guests aboard the Esperanza III had conducted an unlogged, highly private meeting in London with an influential member of Queen Camilla's personal patronage advisory board. This was not a chance encounter. It was a structured discussion held away from official calendar entries. When this revelation reached Kensington Palace, it transformed what had been framed as a series of unfortunate oversights into undeniable evidence of systemic circumvention. The paper trail directly linked individuals seeking regulatory and heritage favors with figures holding immediate access to the Queen Consort's inner circle. The immediate fallout became visible to the public on September 12, 2025. King Charles arrived at a high-profile film premiere in central London completely alone. Royal watchers and press outlets immediately took notice, as Camilla had been explicitly listed on the official program distributed to media outlets just days prior. The official explanation released by the palace attributed her last-minute absence to a sudden scheduling conflict, offering no further details. While mainstream royal correspondents reported the official line without hesitation, senior officials inside the palace understood the true weight of that empty space beside the king. It was the very first public sign that Camilla's diary was no longer under her sole control, and that key operational decisions regarding her appearances were being actively intervened in from the outside. This sudden shift coincided with the ongoing reality of King Charles's health management. Since commencing cancer treatment in early 2024, the king's working routine had undergone significant structural adaptations. While Charles remained deeply committed to his constitutional duties, medical advice required a far more regulated schedule, leading to reduced travel, shorter meetings, and built-in periods of rest. Consequently, the daily operational management of the monarchy had naturally drifted toward the heir to the throne. Over preceding 18 months, William had increasingly stepped into executive decision-making spaces, chairing sensitive institutional briefings, and reviewing administrative files that would historically have required the monarch's direct oversight. This was not a hostility-driven takeover, but rather an inevitable institutional evolution dictated by physical reality. However, it meant that when the yacht scandal erupted, the balance of power inside the palace had already tipped decisively toward Kensington Palace. The private conversations between King Charles and Prince William following the discovery of the unlocked London meeting were among the most emotionally charged of Charles's reign. Charles, bound by deep affection for his wife and a lifelong desire to protect her standing, found himself trapped between marital loyalty and his solemn duty to the crown. He reached out to William directly, attempting to de-escalate the situation and pleading for patience. Charles argued that a formal, sweeping review into Camilla's network would inevitably leak to the press, creating a public crisis that would inflict permanent damage on the institution he had spent decades preparing to lead. He assured William that Camilla had given him her personal word that no impropriety had occurred during the 2023 or 2025 trips. William's response was characteristically cold, precise, and unwavering. He informed his father plainly that personal assurances could not override verified documentation, port logs, and corporate filings. William pointed out that the story was already leaking through European media channels, and that hiding behind vague personal guarantees would only ensure maximum destruction when the full scope of financial links was inevitably published by investigative journalists. He made it clear that the choice was no longer between managing a quiet internal review or avoiding public scrutiny. The choice was between enforcing institutional accountability immediately or allowing the entire modern monarchy to be dragged down by another devastating integrity scandal. Facing an immovable wall, Charles requested time to consult with Camilla and her advisors. William granted a strict 72-hour window. Those 3 days inside Clarence House in Buckingham Palace were defined by intense, panic consultations involving legal counsel, private secretaries, and senior communications advisors. When Camilla was pressed directly regarding the unlocked London meeting between her patronage advisor and the yacht guest, her defense was that she had no knowledge the meeting had taken place. Yet, rather than resolving the issue, this defense created an equally dangerous problem. If Camilla was telling the truth, it meant her own senior staff were operating independently, utilizing her position and network to facilitate high-level access for corporate donors without her knowledge or oversight. If she was not telling the truth, it meant deliberate concealment. Neither scenario was defensible under the new governance standards William had instituted. By the end of the 72 hours, King Charles recognized that his position was untenable. He could not refute the physical evidence compiled in William's file, nor could he shield his wife's office, without openly contradicting the very principles of transparency he had publicized throughout his own tenure. On Thursday evening, Charles called William to concede. The king authorized a comprehensive review to proceed, making only 2 deeply personal requests: that Camilla be treated with dignity throughout the administrative process, and that no public announcements be made without his prior knowledge. William agreed to those terms. What followed was a quiet, clinical, and systematic reduction of Queen Camilla's official footprint. The institutional apparatus that had supported her public role began to be systematically restructured from within. Camilla's autumn schedule, which had originally featured 14 major solo engagements, including charity galas, hospital openings, and keynote addresses, was quietly overhauled. Within weeks, 6 of those prominent engagements were reassigned to other senior working royals. The host organizations were informed that the changes were necessary due to overarching scheduling pressures, and no further explanations were offered. Simultaneously, William's team initiated a comprehensive restructuring of Camilla's personal staff. In early October, her deputy private secretary and a senior communications advisor were informed that their positions were being eliminated as part of a palace-wide administrative efficiency drive. Both officials were quietly transitioned into alternative administrative roles within the broader royal estate, and neither position was refilled. By late October, additional junior support staff were reassigned, reducing Camilla's dedicated team from 11 members down to just 7. Furthermore, her access to sensitive state and institutional information was heavily restricted. While senior royals historically received comprehensive daily briefing papers covering domestic policy, foreign affairs, and institutional strategy, Camilla's distribution list was drastically narrowed. Briefings regarding broader policy and crown estate management ceased entirely, moving her office to a strict need-to-know basis. Central to this seamless transition was Catherine, Princess of Wales. Having returned to public duties with renewed vigor, Kate stepped forward to fill the vacant operational spaces. She absorbed several of the high-profile engagements previously assigned to Camilla, including key leadership conferences and national charitable events. Kate's office handled these additions with absolute professionalism, signaling to the public and the institution that the future of royal patronage was stable, modern, and aligned with the highest standards of integrity. By late October 2025, the reality of this power shift was underlined during a private weekend at Highgrove House. King Charles hosted Prince William and Catherine for a quiet family gathering at his estate, while Queen Camilla remained in London at Clarence House. To the outside world, it was passed off as a routine, non-official weekend. Inside the palace, however, the message was unmistakable. The shield that had protected Camilla for decades had permanently fractured, and the future king had fully assumed control of the crown's direction. By November 2025, the silent transformation taking place behind the heavy gates of Buckingham Palace had evolved from an internal disciplinary measure into a complete operational blueprint for the future of the British monarchy. Prince William delivered a private address to a select gathering of senior civil servants and institutional advisors involved in public sector management reform. Although the meeting was held strictly behind closed doors with no official media transcript released, details leaked by high-level attendees offer a profound look into William's core philosophy. He stated clearly that any institution that chooses to protect individuals at the expense of its own fundamental integrity cannot and will not survive in the modern era. He did not need to explicitly name Queen Camilla or reference the superyacht scandal. Every single person in that room understood precisely what had transpired over the preceding 3 months and what it meant for the Crown's direction. William's uncompromising stance on governance is not a sudden emotional reaction, but rather a methodology developed through years of managing the Duchy of Cornwall. Since assuming control of the billion-pound estate in September 2022, William has systematically modernized its operations, eliminating informal legacy arrangements that relied purely on personal trust rather than clear, legally binding documentation. Under his leadership, outside contractors were replaced, management teams were restructured, and strict transparency guidelines were established. He applied the exact same rigorous corporate framework to the Royal Foundation, transforming it into a streamlined, goal-oriented organization with audited accounts and clear performance metrics. Having witnessed his family suffer repeated, devastating damage from undocumented private arrangements over decades, William concluded early on that absolute transparency is the only viable defense for a constitutional monarchy. This philosophy underpins William's broader vision for a significantly slimmed-down monarchy. The days of expansive royal households with dozens of extended family members carrying out ambiguous public duties on the taxpayer's dime are permanently over. The public face of the modern crown has been deliberately reduced to a tight, disciplined core. William, Catherine, King Charles, and Princess Anne operating with streamlined workloads and direct oversight. By shrinking the working perimeter, William has minimized institutional risk, eliminating the shadowy gray zones where private corporate hospitality, lobbying, and conflict of interest previously thrived. Within this modernized structure, Catherine's position has fundamentally transformed. Having returned to full-time duties, her role extends far beyond traditional ceremonial support. Insiders describe her as a primary co-strategist alongside William, attending high-level planning meetings and shaping the institutional priorities of the royal family. Her office seamlessly absorbed the high-profile patronages and engagements removed from Camilla's calendar, ensuring stability and maintaining public trust. As Kate stepped into these core operational spaces, the contrast became unmistakable. The center of gravity inside the royal family had permanently shifted toward Kensington Palace. Against this backdrop, the reduction of Queen Camilla's role is not a temporary disciplinary phase, but a permanent realignment. The engagements transferred to Kate will not be returned. The reductions in Camilla's dedicated staff will not be reversed, and her access to sensitive state briefings remains strictly limited. While Camilla retains her official title and continues to appear alongside King Charles at major state occasions, her daily influence within the institution has been systematically neutralized. This reality points to an inevitable and difficult future that palace officials quietly acknowledge behind closed doors. When King Charles's reign eventually comes to an end, Camilla will assume the traditional title of Queen Dowager. She will retain her title, but major royal estates, financial control, and the institutional apparatus will pass directly to William as king. The shield that once protected her, built on Charles's personal authority and devotion, will cease to exist. Her standing and security within the royal perimeter will depend entirely on William's institutional framework. Given the decisive manner in which William acted to protect the monarchy's integrity during the Yacht scandal, it is clear that no exceptions will be made for informal arrangements or personal privilege. The luxury yacht scandal began as an obscure maritime registry update that almost no one noticed, but it ended up triggering the most significant internal power shift in modern royal history. It exposed the vulnerabilities of the old way of doing business inside Buckingham Palace and accelerated a generational transition of power that was already underway. Prince William did not wait for the crown to be placed upon his head to begin shaping the future. He took charge, enforced accountability, and demonstrated that under his watch, the survival and integrity of the monarchy will always come before personal loyalty or royal privilege.